What's the latest on Jimmy Butler with the NBA trade deadline just days away? Can Kevin Durant be on the move? And if not the Phoenix Suns, where could Butler end up? We'll answer that and more in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramill. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Jam-packed show for you today. We're going to talk about the possible Jimmy Butler landing spots just days ahead of Thursday's NBA trade deadline, plus another star that could shake loose out of the Western Conference. But first, here's the latest. I'm gonna spill the beans, David. This is everything we've got on Jimmy Butler as of today, as of right now. Recording this 6:14 p.m. Eastern Time. The Phoenix Suns still calling, still have not found a deal. The Suns part of this, we'll get to more of it, but they still remain the team that's most motivated to get Jimmy Butler. Teams have also started calling Phoenix about Kevin Durant. The Warriors have been tied to a lot right now, including Durant, including Jimmy Butler. Shams Charania said on Monday afternoon that if you're a team with an all-star, the Warriors have called. So that's just another thing that's happening that could potentially impact Miami here. Memphis and Milwaukee still lingering as potential Jimmy Butler destinations. Memphis doesn't want to include any of their young players, Gigi Jackson, Jalen Wells, Vince Williams Jr., this according to Sam Amick. Milwaukee is starting to look at other options. And the Golden State Warriors, despite the fact that Brian Windhorst reported on Sunday that Butler has informed the Warriors not to trade for him because he wouldn't sign an extension there, that doesn't sound like it's totally turned them off of the scent of Jimmy Butler here. And then going back to Phoenix, the Heat still not willing to take on Bradley Beal as a part of the Jimmy Butler deal, even if they were to include the 3 first-round picks, because Bradley Beal, as we know, has a no-trade clause. So there are your updates. Not a ton of movement, right? Jimmy Butler's still a member of the Miami Heat for now, but that's where things stand with just, a couple days before the deadline, David. So what part of that do you want to start with?
It's all of it, I guess. I mean, trying to tackle any of it seems kind of, superfluous just because it's all tied together. Like, I mean, one domino has to fall between all these teams involved. And unfortunately, that's Bradley Beal's no trade clause and Jimmy Butler's willingness. I don't even think Jimmy Butler's willingness to sign anywhere is as important a factor as it makes it seem. Like, I'm not going to sign it. It's like, okay, too bad. We don't care. Like, as far as the Miami Heat front office is concerned, they're not doing this out of any favor to Jimmy, and Jimmy could play the rest of the season with X team that he might not want to re-sign for, and he'll just walk, or he'll opt in next year, and that's a problem for him to kick down the road until later on. I think the more fascinating part, at least for Heat fans, is what happens with Kevin Durant. Like, that's the name again, and I know it seems like maybe we're kind of circling back or kicking a dead horse, or it's KD has been linked to the Heat in the past. We talked about this before we started recording. What is the likelihood of Kevin Durant being moved by the Phoenix Suns? And both you and I are in pretty much agreement that there would be no reason for them to move him. Jimmy Butler is the target for the Phoenix Suns because they view him, as you've said, as an upgrade over Bradley Beal, not to replace Kevin Durant. He's not there to join a big three of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Jimmy. He's there to join KD and Devin Booker, replacing Bradley Beal. And so moving KD seems like an unlikely scenario, unless for some reason they don't trade. They are not able to acquire Jimmy Butler, assuming Jimmy Butler gets traded to Memphis, Golden State, Milwaukee, somewhere like that.
It's a fascinating thing, right? Because we've just seen Luka Doncic shake loose. We've seen De'Aaron Fox get traded in these last couple of days, and so the idea that Kevin Durant is untouchable, I don't know what is real or what is fake anymore, right?
No one's untouchable.
It feels like everybody is super touchable these days, but the Kevin Durant part is interesting. But before we get to that, I think there's some steps that we have to take before we kind of get to the Kevin Durant question. And the first thing is, if the Suns can't trade Bradley Beal, if they can't convince Miami or any other team to take Beal, then what happens to Jimmy Butler? Because that's the only way you get to, once you answer that question, or I guess once you make the assumption that the Suns can't trade Bradley Beal, that's where the Kevin Durant part of this gets involved. But if the Suns can't trade Bradley Beal, then what happens to Jimmy Butler? So, to your point, I don't see the Suns trading Kevin Durant for Jimmy Butler willingly, right? It's a different situation if Kevin Durant asks for a trade. But
Correct.
That they don't want Jimmy Butler. They want Jimmy Butler as the upgrade to Bradley Beal to play with Booker and Durant, like you said. They can't find a trade for Bradley Beal. And all I've heard for weeks now is the Suns are still making calls. They're trying to make it work. They're still motivated to trade Bradley Beal and find a third team to take Beal. The Heat don't want Beal because of the no trade clause. Other teams don't want Beal for the no trade clause. Teams that would be interested in Beal, Beal is saying, I don't want to go there because I have the no trade clause. I have the ability to veto any deal. I hold the cards, to use Bradley Beal's terminology. Yeah, for sure. But the part that I suppose before this weekend, it's like, look, there's only 28 teams that we're talking about. Like, you can only, like, the Suns, I mean, how long does it take to call all 28 teams in the league? Do you want Bradley Beal? Do you want Bradley Beal? It doesn't take that long, right? It probably takes a week. I don't know. I have no idea. But they've been calling teams for weeks. Unless the NBA adds the Vegas franchise between now and the trade deadline, the Suns are out of teams to call. And so I understand. So I was kind of just like, well, that's never going to happen. If they haven't found a Beal team, then when are they going to?
Right.
And then the Luka trade happens, and then the De'Aaron Fox trade happens. And that's like the ripple effects we are just beginning to understand, but it's essentially a trade that kind of shakes the snow globe of the NBA. And so then, okay, spend a couple days, see what happens. Like, is Chicago more interested in Beal? Are these team XYZ, like, are they, because of all of this and however it impacted them, are they interested in Bradley Beal now? So you make those calls. So maybe that's still, they're in the process of doing that. I'm looking at the chessboard and I don't really see the team that was impacted by those huge seismic trades that then say, yeah, get me Bradley Beal. And then again, Beal being like, and that's the team I want to go to. Beal wants to go to a contending team or a team in a warm weather city. Preferably both for him, but it sounds like he'd be willing to accept either one. Doesn't sound like any of those teams out there exist that want to trade for Bradley Beal. So let's just do that assumption game. Let's assume that the Suns are unable to trade Bradley Beal before Thursday at 3 p.m.
Right.
What happens to Jimmy?
You got to find another partner. And I think that at that point in time, regardless of your preference, you would trade him to Golden State if they're willing to take on that contract. You would trade him to Memphis, whoever, and for whatever deal you can find. Like we've discussed the possibility before.
Well, then I'm sorry because you were talking about the preference, but like what? So we've already heard Jimmy say, "I don't want to go to Golden State," and for Memphis, I don't want to play for him. Does Jimmy Butler then say, if it's basically clear to him in the 11th hour, hey, dude, the Suns are not trading, it's not happening. Does he start to back off of the things that he's leaking out there in terms of, I'm not going to sign here, here, and there? I think he would have to. If he's kind of painted himself into a corner is what I'm trying to get at is you've told all these teams that you only want Phoenix and you're never going to play for the Miami Heat again because those bridges have been burnt. So it's not as if the Suns can't trade Bradley Beal, you could just go back to Miami and be like, psych, just kidding, I'll play out the season. There's no repairing what happened here in Miami. So then do you have to kind of try to repair what happened, what you said to Memphis or Golden State and say, I changed my mind, I'll play for you, trade for me, I got to get out of Miami?
Is it even his choice? Like, it doesn't matter what he said or put out. Like, oh, my preference isn't to resign there. Like, again, I think unless you're Bradley Beal, you don't have any say in this matter. Like, Jimmy does not have any
those teams away potentially from trading for him. So, like, just smoothing.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. To some degree, to some degree. Like, what's the threat here? And then we just talked about it earlier.
That he does what he's done in Miami. They just that he causes a stink. And
for the next 3 months of the season, 4 months of the season.
I mean, if you're Golden State and Memphis, you want to make something out of this season.
Okay. I mean, is it that big a risk? Like, again, I mean, they would be moving Andrew Wiggins' salary. They'd be moving Marcus Smart's salary, and Memphis. Both those teams would be benefiting from the acquisition of him to some degree. Is he going to torpedo something there? We've talked about the delicate balance and the camaraderie and nature of the Golden State locker room, because you've seen it up close. And while it's something that they don't want to necessarily overturn or upset in any way, I don't think Jimmy's presence is going to be, if he just goes there and says flat out, I'm not going to play here. It's like, okay, buddy, get ready to support Li Ning in China, because there's not going to be an NBA team willing to hire you. You're going to opt out. Good luck with all that. Like, if you're going to burn every bridge and every team that you've ever played for, I don't think that it's going to be beneficial for him.
It is nothing's ever stopped. I do agree generally with what you're saying. Like, if those teams really want Jimmy Butler, they'll just trade for Jimmy Butler and they'll deal with it. I think it would, and I think for Golden State specifically, it would help matters if Jimmy Butler was able to communicate with them. Listen, I'm going to play, and I'm going to play hard. I think that would soothe a lot of some of the concerns that people in that organization may have over acquiring Jimmy Butler. I'm assuming the same could be said for Memphis. I don't have any connection to Memphis, no reporting on Memphis whatsoever. I'm just assuming that if you get word from Jimmy Butler, hey, I want to make a lot of money this summer, whether it's from you or somebody else, I'm going to play my ass off over the next couple of months, and then we can maybe make a run for this thing. And that's going to help everybody. You could also call his bluff and be like, I don't believe it. But I think it would be a little helpful in maybe getting those teams to really dive in, because again, the reporting here is that the only offer Miami has is from Phoenix. And that offer is Bradley Beal and 3 first-round picks. That's the only offer that's on the table. They've had conversations with other teams, but they haven't gotten an offer. What's that little something that's going to take Golden State, Memphis, Milwaukee, whatever team to make an offer here? I think that's maybe the interesting part in all this.
Ultimately consider the Beal plus picks? If they haven't already,
I think we have to have that conversation. Let's talk about that. We'll talk about if that is the only scenario, is that the scenario, plus alternative landing spots for Jimmy Butler. We'll get into all of that, plus the Kevin Durant option later on in the show. All of that coming up next on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about the red flags we should avoid, but what if we focus more on identifying the positive signs of our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, well, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a relationship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries and improve your communication skills. It empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. Therapy provides tools for managing conflicts in ways that strengthen your connections rather than break them down. And BetterHelp makes it easy, offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team is a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter. One stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. The Bradley Beal part of this. We put out a poll a couple days ago on the Locked On Heat Twitter account and basically asked, would you just take Beal, 3 years, $50 million a year-ish, the no trade clause, and the 3 first-round picks? Would you just hold your nose and do it just to turn the page on this Jimmy Butler situation? And you and I were both surprised that a majority of Heat fans, or a majority of people who voted on that poll, said yes, they would just do it. And I think that Beal, I think there's a basketball fit. If you just look at the way Miami is playing right now, with 2 guards who could space the floor, a defensive wing in Haywood Highsmith, and then their 2 bigs, Bradley Beal is a better player than Duncan Robinson. If you just upgrade that spot, you could argue that the Heat are a better team in that way, understanding that, you're kind of upgrading the Duncan Robinson spot. You're not upgrading the Jimmy Butler spot, because Jimmy Butler is just not a factor on this team, so you can't even consider what this team would look like with Jimmy Butler anymore. So in that way, they would be better. And then you look at those 3 first-round picks. I guess we're kind of doing a pros and cons here, David. I guess you look at those 3 first-round picks, and they happen to be the exact picks that the Miami Heat would need to go from 1 tradable first to 4 because of the Stepien rule. The Phoenix picks that they got from Utah, 2025, 2027, and 2029, specifically 27 and 29, are the exact picks the Miami Heat need. And if they acquired them, they would unlock the ability to trade 4 first-round picks this summer as opposed to 1. I don't believe that to be a coincidence, that those are the picks that Phoenix targeted from Utah. I think those picks were targeted very specifically for that reason.
To make themselves more alluring to Miami.
Correct. And to specifically Miami. Because I think Phoenix might have known, because I don't think the Heat were all that interested in the 2031 pick, unprotected. I think there's more value to them getting those 3 worst picks, understanding that because of the Stepien rules, now we'll be able to actually make a move faster. We can make a move as soon as this summer if we have these picks. Here's the problem with that. Because as soon as you start talking into yourself into it, you remember the one thing. Bradley Beal, no trade clause. Making $50 million a year. Assuming that you'd have Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Bradley Beal, that's $150 million due to 3 players. You're right up. I mean, you're almost at the salary cap already. It's just a lot of money. And I don't think this team wants to trade Tyler or Bam to save themselves any money and reduce payroll. And so you say, like, okay, like we could trade for that superstar player, and maybe it's Terry Rozier plus Duncan Robinson plus 4 first. Like, is that maybe a young player? Is that getting you the superstar you want? I don't know. No. And so probably not, right? And so the logic starts to kind of fall apart here pretty easily. I don't see a way that the Heat can take Bradley Beal as long as he has that no trade clause. And according to Mark Bartelstein, his agent, who has been very public about this, Beal has no intention of waiving that no trade clause. It comes with him no matter where he goes. Just like it came with him from Washington to Phoenix, it would come with him from Phoenix to potentially Miami or wherever he would go. Right. He has the ability to just eliminate it from his contract at any point. Mark Bartelstein has been very vocal about that's not going to happen. So unless Beal is willing to remove it in order to get to Miami, and unless the Heat are able to convince him to get rid of it, I just don't see it happening.
I'm starting to try to come to grips with the idea of Beal playing for Miami. But I will say this. I think, one, he's been kind of overlooked in terms of what he's capable of. Like, he's an all-star level player. Like, it wasn't that long ago where he would have been viewed as a clear upgrade over Tyler Hero, and it would have been a great move from Miami to add him. He's a guy who exchanged jerseys with Bam, and there was a friendship there, and everybody kind of thought, well, this is a good player to have on this roster. It's nothing like playing in Phoenix on a team that was probably dysfunctional to begin with for the last season and a half, and has told you basically for that last season and a half that you're not that good. As he was going through injury, as he was going through adjustments, as he was going through just, again, playing alongside a change of coaches, playing alongside Kevin Durant, it's a mess. It hasn't been an easy situation. And now all of a sudden the stink of the organization has attached itself to him. It's like that episode of Seinfeld where the guy who takes the car,
the valet.
Yeah, the BO. Yeah, that's right. It's on everything, and everyone that goes in that car sticks with him.
Sell
he can't
the
take
car.
it back. He can't get rid of the clothes. Yeah, he has to sell the car, and they won't even take it.
Good.
Yeah, at some point he just leaves it on the side of the street.
That's
and somebody goes,
the smelly
like,
car. Bradley Beal, like, nobody wants the smelly Bradley Beal car. No, they can't even sell it.
Right.
It's
unfortunate, and so
I think
will
Beal's
say
a good player.
I think so too. I will say though, you've got to have another move down the pike, like at the same time, like within the next week. And I don't know that that's possible. You've got to be able to shop Terry. Like you can't just have Duncan on the roster not playing because you've got Rozier and you're going to start Beal presumably, but you've got to be able to shop Terry. And what's the market for Terry Rozier? There isn't one.
No.
I don't see it, and I don't know what that would take. Is it Terry Rozier plus one of the young kids? One of the young guys, in order to be able to move that contract.
You can't do that. And by the way, I don't think the Heat are that motivated to get off this Rozier contract. It comes off the books.
No, I'm just saying,
in time
if you have to acquire Beal,
and all that.
If you have to acquire Beal,
you can still bring Rozier and Duncan off the bench, and then Hero and Beal are your starters. It's not ideal, sure, but nothing about this is. My problem with Beal is, look, we could try to talk ourselves into it. He's not ever impacted winning ever in his career. And I do think he gets kind of it was a weird Wizard situation, a weird Sun situation, but
Yeah.
If I mean, he took the money to stay in. Well, if you cared about winning that much, you wouldn't have taken the money from Washington. You would have figured a way to get out. Just like every other player.
People
in his
said that
situation.
about Dame, though. People said that about Dame. Like they won a lot.
Trailblazers were going to the conference finals at least. Like that happened. That was Beal never.
There was a better team. That was a better team with a better roster. And then the Washington Wizards. I mean, the Wizards were a playoff team until John Wall broke down, and then they weren't, and they were just kind of like retooling.
And then Beal signed the Supermax with all this stuff. It was crazy. And
get that money.
I guess so, but so my point is, like, I wouldn't be. I think Beal is okay. I don't think he's an all-star level player now, but he shoots 40% from three and has been consistent with that for the most part. Still averages like 16 points per game. I thought defensively he was a lot more engaged earlier in the year until he's basically until they started throwing pie at his face in Phoenix. But he would be an upgrade over Duncan Robinson at that spot. He could help this team on the court. But you can't trade for him as long as he's got that no trade clause, because then you end up being what this team has been, but worse, more expensive, and with fewer outs because he has that no trade clause. And I just don't see how you could do that. I think at that point you would just say, I guess we'll just keep Jimmy and figure this out and wait until the summer. I just don't see a world where you take Beal as long as he has no trade clause. Unless he waives the no trade clause. I think if he were to waive the no trade clause, I think if you're the Heat, you have to have a meeting about it. I still don't know that you do it because he's so freaking expensive. But I think you'd have to have a meeting about it at least. Let's talk about the other part of this, though. What if the Suns are the team that pivot? And they get word from Kevin Durant, hey, maybe you should trade me. What if Kevin Durant basically pulls a De'Aaron Fox? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com and get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. So the new name, there's been rumblings. I'm not even calling them reports, not rumors, rumblings. Teams are calling the Phoenix Suns about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is in a very similar position as De'Aaron Fox was prior to getting moved to San Antonio, where he's up for an extension, still under contract for next year, could be a free agent in 2026, but up for an extension this summer. Kevin Durant could have signed this extension, can still sign this extension. He has declined to do it. I think maybe in a less obvious sense, he's kind of looking around Phoenix and being like, is this really where I want to be for the twilight years of my career? I'm 35. Is this what I really want to be doing? Durant is still an awesome, he's still a top 10 player in the league, even at this age. He's still an all NBA scorer. He would help Miami, and he would help a lot of teams. The Warriors presumably are reportedly out there have called about Kevin Durant. I think if you're the Heat, you have to call. I think if you're the Heat, you have to do more than call. I think if you're the Heat, you have to see if Bam has Kevin Durant's number anywhere from their time playing with Team USA.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe leverage that connection. If
they're friendly. They're friendly. That was friendly. Part of the...
Kevin Durant once wanted to play for Miami because of Bam Adebayo. So that, to me, in these next couple of days, if Pat Riley and this Heat front office can pull this rabbit out of that hat, would be pretty remarkable. But the scenario would be Kevin Durant looks around, sees, oh, you're not going to be able to trade Bradley Beal.
Right.
So what are we really doing here? I appreciate the Nick Richards deal, but I'm not sure that that's the thing that puts us over the top. maybe I'm just not going to resign here. And if he lets the Suns front office know, hey, I'm not going to resign here. You do with that information as you please. He might not even have to make the trade request, because if you're the Suns, and people have been arguing this for a long time, like now's the time to trade Kevin Durant. Just like now is the time for San Antonio to trade De'Aaron Fox. You want to get ahead of this as much as you can. You could still get a lot for Kevin Durant. Now, they are a little, there's still some things that they have to deal with. Being a second apron team still, they can't take back more money, can't aggregate salaries. There's all those hoops that they'd have to jump through. But you would presumably get a lot for Kevin Durant if you were to trade him right now. And if they start shopping him, the Heat would have to be, I just don't know. Once we get to that part of the scenario, I'm not sure how it works, because you're not swapping Kevin Durant for Jimmy Butler. I don't think, unless Phoenix says, well, we want to still try to make the most out of this build, even without Kevin Durant. What could we do with Jimmy, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal? I suppose they could go in that direction. And Jimmy Butler would theoretically be the best player available in that scenario, and could potentially offer them cap space this summer if he were to opt out and go somewhere else, like, or in a year from now. But
3-team deal, sending Jimmy to Golden State, Wiggins,
option.
etc. Yeah, to Phoenix, KD to Miami, or whatever. Substitute Memphis for Golden State or X team.
Milwaukee, whatever.
Yeah.
Well,
whatever
wouldn't
team
those teams want, then wouldn't they prefer to
KD
have Kevin Durant?
No, I don't know. Like, I think on the balance, KD clearly is a better player and everything else like that. But I feel like just because it's not as public as Jimmy's dramas necessarily, enough stink has followed KD around too. Like, and it's not always his fault. And I understand things went bad and Brooklyn, and James Harden was added to the mix, and Kyrie was hurt, etc. So I it's not necessarily something that he's done wrong, but he's a pretty mercurial player on his own. I just don't think that he burns bridges as violently or loudly as Jimmy has.
Not. Yeah.
But the bridges still remain pretty burnt. You know,
they're creaky.
So yeah, they're not great. Like, he's not going back to Oklahoma City anytime soon.
And that's the thing about the Golden State option too. Would Kevin Durant be open to going back to Golden State? Wouldn't that be a little bit of like, a tail between your legs moment there?
Yeah, I think I already did that. I already did what I had to do there,
and didn't do anything of what I was supposed to do after it. And I'm going back there to try to win again. It's sort of an admission of guilt, isn't it? And so so maybe Kevin Durant just says, I don't want to go there. But the Suns say, well, we want the young things. Like, can we get a Podziemski or a Kuminga or whatever it is, picks? And then I would say the other way that, like, another team says, well, we'd rather have Jimmy Butler than Kevin Durant, is because Jimmy Butler is going to be a lot cheaper than Kevin Durant. So if you're Milwaukee, for instance, you don't have any picks. You have, I think, one. That's not enough to get. That's not going to be enough to get Durant. But is Middleton and Bobby Portis in one pick enough to get Jimmy Butler? Probably, right? I think at this point. And so, do you just take that? You're Miami. You take those three things, you reroute them to Phoenix, and then add your own things on top of that to go get Kevin, and then you end up getting Kevin Durant. Milwaukee gets Jimmy Butler at a bargain deal, and then the Heat get Kevin Durant for appropriate value, and Phoenix gets appropriate value out of their superstar where Miami didn't, but Miami ends up getting Kevin Durant.
And would Miami be willing to re-sign KD? Presumably.
Yeah, why not?
I just, you got to ask the question, right?
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
But I think the stability of the organization would be mutually beneficial. Like, I think KD would certainly thrive and he'd help Miami win. But I think, again, the organizational integrity, being that he's not Jimmy Butler and that he's not, a guy like LeBron James or something like that. Yeah, no, I just think, but I'm saying just the stability of the organization. Like, I think the respect between him and Spo would be a great combination. Like, they work together for Team USA, and I think he respects that. I think Bam does a lot of the things that KD is looking for, to just allow him to be, KD and do his thing. And if you got enough young and up and coming players that would kind of benefit there, like, I think he would be happier here in a way that he hasn't been happy since probably Oklahoma City. He succeeded to an unprecedented level in not unprecedented, but to a great level in Golden State. But I don't think even he would admit that he was happy there. Like, they just won a lot of games.
Not after the last year or so. Like, the first 2 years, I think he was happy. So but I agree with overall the premise there. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
and then you get to live in Miami. he probably has a little bit of regret of, I probably should have went to Miami instead of Phoenix. How could you not at this point? So
Maybe.
I think the Heat had to be looking at De'Aaron Fox, and they were not going to make a move on Jimmy Butler until the De'Aaron Fox thing got sorted out, or at least decided. And I think now you have to look at this Kevin Durant thing if you're Miami and say, I don't think we can move off of Jimmy Butler until we know what happens with Durant. And the risk there is that you get to the deadline and nothing happens on either front, and everybody's just sort of what they are. But I think it's worth the risk, considering that it doesn't sound like there's any other offers out there. Unless there is something else out there that we don't know about, or something else comes along. Deadlines have a way of creating stuff and making things happen, and things do sometimes materialize right before the deadline. But if you gotta, it's time to work it, man. And Dwayne Wade's not around to figure this out and work those relationships anymore. But I don't think anybody could be shy about it. And I would love to know. I would love to know what Kevin Durant is thinking right now, because the other reporting is that he's aware that his name has come up in trade talks potentially with the Phoenix front office. And so, what does he think of that? More twists and turns on the Jimmy Butler front, sure to come. We got a couple of recaps later in the week, but for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.